Dave, where I think it's all leading, in my mind anyway, it's pretty clear. The IMF Western centric crowd are trying to alleviate Greece's problem of too much debt with more debt, and that is an unworkable situation. And if the West continues to try and slam Greece with more debt to solve their problem of too much debt, that will force Greece into a more cozy or more encompassing relationship with the BRIC nations. So it doesn't look to me that the West is going to let up on their insistence that Greece continue to try to shoulder more debt. Therefore, my view is that Greece will be effectively forced to exit the euro, which means, in my view, the euro is a doomed institution, and it's only a matter of time before Greece either leaves of their own accord or is forced out of the euro.
Now, do you think this will have an effect on the other euro countries like France, Spain? And do you think then something will occur here in the United States with the dollar if this does occur? Because we hear Jack Lew giving a lot of warnings about Greece defaulting and leaving.
My view towards Greece being forced out or exiting the euro will be the proverbial straw that breaks the back of the camel, which is the euro. So my view of the eurozone going forward is the concept from its origins was unworkable, and in real time we're seeing it to be unworkable. And I do believe that once Greece officially leaves the euro as an institution, there will be we'll be opening the floodgates for the likes of Spain, Italy, and probably France in quick order. And the euro, in my view, is a doomed concept.
So, will this have any ramifications on the dollar itself? Or
I mean, very short term, Dave. I think we could see, and we have seen empirically, the dollar showing strength relative to other fiat currencies. But just remember, if you want to view these fiat currencies as pigs in a poke, all the pigs in the poke will be slaughtered, because that's what happens to pigs when they're in the poke. And it just so happens that, at least it seemingly, the euro is going to go to the knockbox first. But that doesn't mean the other pigs in the sty aren't going to be slaughtered as well, because what they all are ultimately is bacon.
Okay. Let me just change subjects here for a second. We see China is pushing the yuan renminbi, and it seems like at this point in time they're trying to make it a reserve currency. We see the IMF is saying that it's not devalued. We understand that China is continually purchasing more and more gold. Why are they doing this? How much gold do you think they have? And why are they trying and pushing the yuan to become a reserve currency?
Well, I'm going to sort of shape my answer a little bit in terms of what my understanding is of China and what they are seeking on a go-forward basis in a geo-economic construct. China wants stability. China wants sustainability, and China recognizes that fiat money, because they invented it hundreds of years ago, but they do recognize the shortfall of a pure fiat money system. They do recognize that long-term, the ability to print money out of thin air is not a sustainable concept. And China's want to possess physical gold bullion is highly aligned with the notion that they want to have honest commerce, because honest commerce is sustainable long term. The Chinese leadership does not want to imperil their country or imperil their position as leaders, because unsustainable practices in commerce lead to failed systems, lead to war, lead to anarchy, and typically lead to change of leadership. And it's not in the Chinese leadership's self-perceived best interests to have change and anarchy and have a situation develop where they lose complete control. This is something that the West seems hell-bent on imposing on everybody, and this seems to be the tact we're following. And I mean, in my view, Dave, I've answered what you asked me, but I didn't necessarily answer it in exactly the way you might have anticipated me answering it. And just to further on to that, the amount of gold, physical gold that China has to a point is irrelevant. But because what's really important is they continue to acquire it, and they have an insatiable appetite for it.
So at this point in time, you mentioned war. I just want to ask you this. You see what's going on around the Spratly Islands, and you see the U.S., it seems like they're provoking China and kind of pushing or poking them. Do you see the U.S. pushing war in this?
I see the Western-led nations, spearheaded by the current U.S. administration, as trying to provoke hostilities, not only in disputed islands off China, referencing China, Japan, but I see them also spearheading the disunity in the Ukraine, even though they've tried to paint Russia and Putin specifically as a villain. We all know by the famous remarks by Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland just how high-handed the Western leadership's view is towards anybody vis-a-vis their position on the Ukraine and on Europe, for that matter. It's been American interventionism that's created the hostilities and the situation, which is sort of looks like it could spiral out of control in Syria. There's been a lot of American, let's say, behind the deal. Look, all these wars, Dave, are all symptoms of a bigger problem. And the real problem is that money in our financial system is on the brink of failing. And the powers that be want to have their I'm just gonna broadly refer to all these incidences as false flags. And they want to have them all in position so that when the financial system finally goes over the edge, they will initiate war. They will start war, and they might start it on numerous fronts at once. And then they will say that the war is the reason why the financial system collapsed, and that will be a lie. And that will be a lie because the real reason the financial system is collapsing is because we have derelict, Keynesian-oriented central banking clowns that have had their run with the financial system, and they've printed way too much money, and they've created way too much demand on a planet that has finite resources, and this has been such a disastrous experiment. And they're so full of themselves, and they're so drunk on power, they will never admit it, Dave. So what they're going to do is they're going to have convenient patsies or false flag incidents on the back burner that they can turn the heat up on very quickly and conveniently blame them for the failure of their beloved Keynesian fiat money system. That's where we're really at. It's a tough dose to swallow, but you know what? My research tells me that's exactly where we are, and historically it's happened before. And if you know your history, you know this is what these clowns do every time their money systems fail. They take us to war.
Rob, I completely agree with absolutely everything that you just said. Everything that I've researched and everything that I look at, I'm 100% with you on that. And I mean, in my mind, I think they know the entire system. They know that the entire system is collapsing. They know they can't continue on with this, and their only out is war, to cover it up. And I agree with you, and I believe this is where we're headed.
You see, Dave, metaphorically, they've been kicking a can down the road, and they've been going to extraordinary means to keep the appearance that there's something okay with the system. But as we've moved down the road and kicked the can, the things that we've seen occur. We've seen, these are all markers that, first we saw the hedonic adjustments to economic reporting. Instead of having people honestly try to kick a field goal from the 30-yard line, in terms of economic data reporting, when they used to report inflation as it really was, we now see that they take things away from the data set for inflation reporting, and basically the way they report inflation data today, they remove anything that goes up in price from the basket of reported things that make up the inflation call. So this is why we have inflation being reported at less than 2% a year, when really the inflation rate is probably 5 to 7 or 8% if you measured it the same way it was measured back in 1980. And this is akin to having somebody stand on the 30-yard line to kick a field goal, moving the goalpost back 30 yards, and then convincing them or trying to convince them that they're still kicking a 30-yard field goal. And you see, so these are the sort of tricks that they've employed to try and make us all believe or buy into the notion that all is well in our financial universe. And the tricks have become more brazen and more blatant as time has gone along. And it's gotten to the point where recently we've seen pronouncements from the likes of people who run Citibank and people from the IMF saying that it might be in all of our best interests to outlaw cash. Really, just think about that for a minute. Anyway, my view has always been the day it comes that people go to the ATM and can't get cash out of the ATM, that'll be the day we finally have anarchy and we will have social unrest, and that's when this will spiral right out of control. But, Dave, it really seems to me that these clownish quacks that run the system, they know very well what's coming, because that's why they've instituted and put in place this jackbooted police state apparatus in America, because it's been their handiwork that's built this Tower of Babel, which is absolutely going to collapse, and these people are already preparing for the aftermath of it. That's the gall that these clowns really have. And as much contempt as they've expressed and demonstrated for humanity, my contempt for them, it rises to a much higher level.
So what you're saying is they've been preparing all this time with the DHS, the police force, not just here in the United States, but I see it in Canada, I see it in Europe, and we see these many false flags where now there's more troops, on the ground in the cities. We see them now pushing very draconian type of laws that take away people's rights, to protect them and to keep them safe. And what you're saying is they've been preparing for this. They've been practicing for this because they know it's coming. And what we're doing right now is just hobbling along until they can get something started.
Dave, let's make it even a little more succinct.
Okay.
The parallels between what's occurring right now in America and has been occurring for the last 10 years is extremely similar to what Hitler did in Germany for the 7 or 8 years before the onset of World War II. And basically what Hitler did before he went on his reign of terror, he passed laws, and they were broadly referred to as the enabling laws. And they basically, in his twisted little world, they said that anything he did going forward was going to be legal. This is exactly what the leadership of America's been doing. They've been harvesting human rights and civil liberties and basically saying that all we do is going to be fair and legal. Well, let me tell you something. Hitler had that little view in his head, and things didn't work out so good for him in Nuremberg. And you know what? The people that are currently running America, one day, I suspect, God willing, they're going to have their own Nuremberg issues to deal with.
Well, let me ask you, how long can they drag this out? I mean, we see it. I mean, we had the Great Recession back in 2008, and here we are in 2015. How much longer can they push this out? Because a lot of people thought, back in 2011 it would occur, something would happen 2013, and now we're at 2015. How much longer, or do you think it's going to happen very soon?
Well, I mean, Dave, I think ultimately when the paradigm does shift, and I do believe it will, and I think we will have an amazing reset at some point in time, and that time may very well be at hand now. I do believe that when it occurs, there will be a very, very sudden paradigm shift, and I think we'll probably experience a time when we wake up one morning and we cannot any longer get money out of the bank. I think something of that magnitude is in our future, likely in our relatively near future. I don't cherish the day that happens, to be honest with you, but my own research and my own training tells me that we are headed for a massive, massive reset. And that's, of course, assuming we don't just have a big, old-fashioned nuclear war.
So, you say nuclear war. You really think they'll go towards nuclear if they don't get their way? Well,
it was a top American. I believe it was a top American general. It was reported last week that he had tweeted. This is a guy who is a very tenured professor at the U.S. War College, and he was in a conversation with a ranking general in the U.S. military, and he tweeted something to the effect that he suspects we'll be at war this summer at some point. Really hope it isn't nuclear. We'll be lucky, I think his words were. We'll be lucky if it isn't nuclear. I'll just say this, Dave. Very highly placed people in the military-industrial complex are using the word war and the likelihood of war or the inevitability of war. And this is not something hatched out of a tinfoil hat or a conspiracy theory. People in the mainstream military-industrial complex are talking openly about this now. This is not imagined. This is not wishful thinking, and believe me, I don't wish for it. But this is what's being discussed openly now by people who are very, very well credentialed to be making such pronouncements.
So
you can draw your own conclusions from that.
No, I mean, I've been watching this and tracking it, and I'm for over 2.5 years now telling people that the U.S. has been maneuvering and placing military assets and building up all along Eastern Europe, the Pacific, the Middle East, and it's continuing. Actually, it's accelerating, and I definitely see war coming, just like you stated. And what I see happening is banks. You mentioned about people won't be able to take money out of the banks. Are you saying they're going to shut the banks down? That's why they can't get the cash out?
It might be that. And what form this takes, Dave, it's a bit of a guess, and it's a bit of a stretch, other than to say we are headed for a time when even more draconian measures on behalf of the people that currently run our financial edifice, they are going to overreach in a vain hope that they can control a system that is spinning completely out of control. Does it take the form of less severe capital controls or more severe capital controls? Will it maybe start off with something a little bit less odious or a little more creeping, like capital controls first on registered accounts and then to be followed by cash accounts? It's tough to say exactly how it's going to roll out, because desperate times require desperate measures, and which particular desperate measure a desperate person is going to choose is something that's, to be honest with you, it's beyond my ability. Start thinking like a really desperate person, and start thinking about the universe of desperate decisions you might make, because some of them might be quite irrational.
What should people expect? I mean, are they going to see, like, when this whole thing starts to fall apart, 1, inflation or deflation? 2, I mean, is it going to be hard to get food from the supermarkets? And are we going to see maybe martial law or something else occur here, like riots and things like that, where they have to say they have to implement martial law?
Dave, it's conceivable we see all of the above. And when I say this, I'm gonna say it's conceivable that we see civil unrest, martial law, but ultimately, speaking directly to your point about whether we see ultimately deflation or inflation, you cannot destroy a currency and have deflation. And fiat money has been debased and deranged and defiled to such a degree that a deflationary ultimate outcome, in my view, is a non-starter. And when you destroy the value of a currency, you ultimately end up with rampant runaway inflation. And my personal view is that to say that we have a deflationary outcome in this ultimately is nothing short of quackery.
So let me just get your take on this. What do you think of this exercise, Jade Helm? Do you think that is in preparation for this?
Sure, it is. It's practice.
So
it's practice. It's practice for. Call it what it is. It's these guys are training to basically subdue peoples in urban environments, and this is what this is all about, and it's to get people conditioned to having military conducting operations in urban areas, so that when they actually roll it out, people say, well, it's just the Army doing what the Army does. No, this is a conditioning exercise, Dave. Absolutely. And listen, anybody who can't see this for what it is an ostrich with their head buried in the sand or somewhere else where the sun doesn't shine.
For the last question, let me ask you, when do you think, I mean, you told us this summer the general's telling us war. Do you think the collapse is going to occur during the summer, or do you think it's going to be the fall, or do you think, what's your prediction on this? We won't hold it.
Well, to begin with, Dave, I think it's a fool's game to predict what day or week it's going to happen. What I can truly say is, with each passing day, we're a day closer to a major paradigm shift or a major reset. I wouldn't be shocked if it occurred this summer. I wouldn't be shocked if it occurred this fall. But I'll tell you, Dave, I also wouldn't have been shocked if it had occurred last fall. So, you see, the reality is the system is ripe for a reset, and the reset is metaphorically low-hanging fruit that's very ripe on a tree. And so the question I guess you're really asking me is, what day do you think the ripe apple is going to fall off the tree? Well, I know that the apple will fall off the tree, but I'm hesitant to say what day.
Cryptocurrency News Channel. Your new future. Thank you. Follow us on YouTube.